If you're between 15 and 25 years old, anywhere in the world, this episode is especially for you. And if you're a parent, teacher, or professor, I hope you're listening too, because what we're about to discuss could have a profound impact on the future of the young people you care about. Now, if you're one of those young adults, over the next few years, you're likely to miss out on opportunities that should have been yours. And that will impact how your life will unfold. Not because you weren't smart enough, not because you weren't qualified enough, but simply because nobody taught you one particular skill. Research analyzing 17 million job advertisements found persuasion to be the third most requested skill by employers. Yet it's a skill that very few schools and universities ever teach. In this episode, you'll discover how the ethical use of truthful words and images can dramatically influence the way people respond to you, helping them see you as more knowledgeable, more trustworthy, and more capable, all without lying or manipulating anyone. You'll hear how job applicants did something simple that led to being offered salaries that were on average 10% higher. How people form lasting impressions of you in just seconds, and how that can help you or hinder you. And why the smallest changes in the way you communicate can have an extraordinary impact on the opportunities that come your way.
Welcome. I'm Dr. Robert Cialdini, and this is the Ethical Persuasion Unlocked podcast. Here, you'll find lessons from the science of persuasion and business growth strategies to unlock the success that has always been yours. Your host is Patrick Vanderbert, a first mover and licensed trainer of the Cialdini Institute, joined by valuable guests whose advice you won't want to miss.
I've been looking forward to doing this episode because it is part of my community project, my effort to make an impact on the younger generation. Within limitations, I donate my time to introduce the soft skill of social influence or ethical persuasion to young adults by donating my time to speak on this in schools, business schools, and universities. In this episode, I'm going to share some understanding and insights that young adults should take to heart, because social influence or ethical persuasion is not only a life skill that will help you to not sabotage your own private and professional success, meaning you don't underperform your potential, but it is also a skill that the World Economic Forum in the Future of Jobs report in 2023 prioritize as the fourth most urgent skill needed in the workforce. And in 2025, they moved it up to priority number 3. So this episode is for young adults, ages 15 to 23 and beyond, for anyone still needing to enter the workforce. And I hope it may also function as a sample for proactive schools, business schools, and universities who really care about their students' success after the education with them, which, of course, directly impacts their employment rate score. So this also has a self-serving purpose for educational facilities. I'd welcome their request for me to present this to their students in person or over video call. So let's dive in. And let's start with what ethical persuasion is, before I start illustrating how powerful it is through entertaining research and case studies. Before the end, I will touch on the universal principles of persuasion and dive deeper into a few of those. I'll give their definitions so you know how they work, illustrate how effective they are by sharing research results, and give you some strategies that you can use to be more persuasive in job applications, in business, and with family and friends. What I'll share with you are small bigs. the smallest and easiest things that you can do that have a big impact on your success. And you can use this to be more influential with your teachers and professors. And, as always, in an ethical way, so both parties win, which builds strong relationships. To use a quote from Dr. Robert Cialdini, this will be the perfect marriage between ethics and effectiveness. So what is persuasion? Have you ever noticed that if one or another person asks a question, makes a request or proposal, one person might be more or less successful in getting agreement or cooperation than the other person? Two people might ask for the same thing, and one person gets a no and the other person gets a yes. I have a younger sister. When it came to my parents, she certainly seemed to get more agreement than I did. You might think that it may depend on the mood of the person granting the request, or that the person asking is more liked or more charismatic, or that the timing of the request might be better from one moment to the next. Well, those are nice justifications for what might be going on and could certainly have something to do with it. But here is an insight that too many people, and especially young adults, don't know. There is a science to how people make decisions, to accept or refuse a request that is made of them. If you know this relatively easy to learn science and develop the application skills, you'll be able to let yes come to the surface in situations where you were always able to achieve it. If you don't use the science, then many of the agreements, acceptances, and cooperation that you could have had will slip through your fingers unnecessarily. Persuasion science is not magic. It doesn't work all the time, but it can dramatically increase the chances that someone will say yes to you, that they agree with you or cooperate with you. Let me hit home how powerful this is, and I'll explain exactly how some of this works later. Depending on how a person was dressed when asked for cooperation from others, the people asked were 79% more willing to participate in a survey, 400% more willing to make a donation to a charity, gave jobs to applicants more easily, and gave them 10% higher starting wages. By adding a single sentence containing a truthful piece of information that those hoping to be persuasive already knew but never thought to use it because they didn't know the science, a real estate office converted 20% more incoming phone calls to appointments, and signed contracts went up by 15.5%. When Dutch high school students were told that other students like them ate fruit to stay healthy, students defiantly said that they didn't care and that hearing that information would not change their eating habits. When later consumption of fruit was measured, it had gone up by 35%. When a company selling home insulation for existing homes rephrased to homeowners the financial effects of insulating their home fully, 150% more people decided to insulate their home fully. In all of these cases, it didn't cost anything to achieve that success, and that success, that cooperation or compliance, was always possible. It was just that if a request was made one way, you get little yeses, and if it's made in another way, you get a lot more yeses. Let me give you some situations where you might finding hearing yes more often valuable. If you need to apply or put in a submission to be accepted in the next school or university that you'd like to attend to, if you are asking for an extension on a due date on some work that you need to do, when you hope that your parents or guardian might allow you to do something like going to an event, trip, or night out. Or maybe you're hoping that they'll lend you or give you some money. What if you ask somebody out on a date? It would be nice if they said yes. And what about applying for that first dream job that will lay in the trajectory of your life and where you'll end up? If you don't get that dream position, you'll have to settle for something less ideal. And your future career advancements within that or other companies will likely change, and not for the good. Again, this is not magic. There's no guarantee that this will produce success every single attempt you make, but it will scientifically increase the chances that you have at success. Is that something that you can afford to waste? Now, let's be frank. I can't teach you this in a podcast episode. There is a lot more to this than I can ever cover in an episode. This is not a course. But I can share the basics, and I will give you some strategies that you can use immediately to be more persuasive and successful, for example, in job applications. Finally, you'll understand what this crucial soft skill is all about. How developing the application skills will make you more valuable for any employer or make your own entrepreneurial ambitions much more likely to bear a lot more fruit and success. I'd encourage you to invest just approximately 20 hours to do formal training with a Cialdini licensed trainer like myself, which also gets you a certificate and lifetime accreditation as Cialdini certified practitioner, which is going to be a strong addition to your resume, but that choice is of course yours. If that's not on the cards for the moment, then you could always go back to episode 1 of this podcast and empower yourself with the insights that you'll find in the first 20 episodes and beyond. Doing that is still not the same as doing a course. It won't help you develop application skills, but you will learn more. Okay, so persuasion is about how we use words, but also images to move more people in our direction. Meaning they, the audience who receives our request, agrees with us and or do what we ask of them more readily. The nice thing is that not only is there a science that teaches us how to do that in the most effective way, but it also works best long-term when we use the science ethically, without lying or cheating or forcing people to do things that they don't want. That would be manipulation, which is what we don't want to use. But yes, the science can be used unethically as well, meaning we could use it to put unfair pressure on people. But that is a bad idea for a number of reasons. Research shows that unethical use of persuasion science might produce short-term results, but it creates long-term disaster because eventually we get found out for lying and cheating people. And clearly, people won't want to deal with you again, but the community as a whole can also find out about your deceitful tactics. And nowadays, with social media, you can destroy your personal name, a brand, or a company name that you might represent literally within a day. And that can follow you around for a long time, possibly the rest of your life. Secondly, It doesn't sit well with too many of us if we need to lie and cheat other people to get ahead. This can cause stress, and we see this in workplaces where employers ask their employees to lie and cheat to get the sale or to achieve the goals of the company. That there is more sick leave amongst those employees. They also leave companies more frequently, and that is also very costly because it costs a lot of money to find and train new staff. This is an enormous cost. With persuasion, we want to not lie, not exaggerate or manufacture things, or propose things that are not to the benefit of the other party. Let me give you a quick example. If you sell something in a retail store, and there are 100 left in stock of this particular item, left in the stockroom, out the back, but you tell me that the one that I'm looking at is the last one, then you would be lying, and therefore would be unethical. If the stockroom was in the other building, and you say that this is the last one you have in the shop, you are technically correct. But if I bought it because it was the last one, and 2 hours later I return to your shop and another one has appeared on the shelf, then I could confront you and say, hey, you said that the one I bought was the last one you had in the shop. And you could answer, well, yes, it was, but we have another 100 left in the other building. Then I would still feel that you lied to me, and I wouldn't want to deal with you again. So it's still unethical. So this is actually great news. You likely don't want to lie and cheat other people. So what I'll share with you can be used without feeling bad about it. And if you do use it, it creates a win-win situation. Both parties win. Another great thing is that when we persuade people to want to do something, which could be agreeing, but it could also be performing an action to clean up after themselves or follow safety procedures properly, then they are going to want to keep staying true to that decision even when we're not around. The decision to do this has come from within them, not pushed on them. Let's get more practical. There are 7 universal principles of persuasion. We refer to them as universal because they work in all languages, all cultures, and all countries. This makes them even more valuable because within our own country we have diverse cultures, and it is easier than ever before to connect with or do business with people in other countries. Let me list the 7 principles: reciprocity, liking, social proof, authority, consistency, scarcity, and unity. They are the principles of persuasion. Why are the principles of persuasion so important? Why do they work to motivate our behavior? When it comes to decision making, the human brain has 2 parts, which was explained by Nobel Prize winning Professor Daniel Kahneman. I explain this in a lot more detail in episode 2 of this podcast, but in brief, it works like this. In our brain, we have System 1 and System 2. System 1 is the intuitive part of the brain that works automatically, outside of our conscious control, and is active all the time. System 1 uses many shortcuts or rules of thumb to make quick decisions. These rules of thumb can be hardwired in us, like paying attention to what other people are doing and attaching greater value to that. Another rule of thumb is that things that are rare and more difficult to obtain are more valuable. And so we place a higher value on things that we have the potential of losing. Think about it. In a fight for survival, it is nice if we get extra things, if we get more money, if we get more food, if we obtain a better place to live. It would be nice if we get more of that. But if we lost what we had, if we lost resources that we could trade with, if the amount of food we had was reduced, or if we were not able to live in the place that we are living, and we were forced to go somewhere that might be less safe, then this could be detrimental. And so it makes sense to pay more attention to things that we could be losing than things that we could be getting more of. These rules of thumb can also be learned from experience. You might have already learned from experience that if you buy something that is cheap, it is often low quality, it doesn't do the job that well or that good, and it might not last that long. Expensive things tend to have a better quality, do a better job, and last longer. As a result, you have a rule of thumb in your head that says expensive equals good. So when we find ourselves in a situation where information comes to our attention and suggests that there's a high chance that this is a good decision for us, those rules of thumb allow us to make a decision more quickly. So that is system one. We could call it the intuitive part of the decision-making brain. On the other side, we have system two in our brain. This is the logical and rational part of the decision-making brain, where system one is fast, automatic, and subconscious. System two is slow and involves conscious thinking. It also takes a lot of energy to use this part of the decision-making brain, and it requires our attention to operate. If you think about riding a bicycle or driving a car, if you've got that experience already, when you have done that many times, you've driven home or ridden home many times, you can do it without much conscious thought. Sometimes you get home and you might not even be sure which route you took. That is because system one, the intuitive part of the brain, was doing things for you. But now imagine having to go somewhere where you've never been before, or having to navigate a street with much more traffic than usual. If you had to pass others who were coming very close to you, then you would need to pay attention, or the outcome wouldn't be that good. You might bump into someone or something. As you need to pay attention and be conscious about what it is you're doing, that means that you are then using system two. Your logical, rational brain is now working. We use system two for complex decisions. It helps us consider all the options to make the best and most reliable decision. Now you'd think that if you or anyone needed to make a decision, that we'd make most of those decisions using the logical, rational part of the brain, right? That's what people and science thought for the longest time. But this Professor Kahneman won a Nobel Prize basically for proving that that's not the case. Back in 2002, he demonstrated that 90% of decisions made by people are made by system one instead, the intuitive part of the brain. Now it is thought that that percentage is 95% or more. Think about that for a moment. Think about situations where you're trying to get others to agree with you. Applying for a job, applying for a university placement, applying for a grant or a scholarship, trying to get your parents or guardians to let you go to a party, ask someone out on a date, convincing your boss or your teacher to allow you to complete some work by a later date. 95% of decisions are made by the intuitive part of the brain, including many, if not most, of these important decisions. But for that to happen, for that to work in our advantage, there does need to be information available for that intuitive part of the brain to respond to. Information that indicates to System 1 that what you are suggesting is a good choice for them. Remember at the beginning, I mentioned that job applicants got 10% higher starting wages because the way they were dressed? That's because the way they were dressed provided information to those needing to decide whether to hire the applicant and where to set their starting wage. And that was based on how they were dressed. The way they were dressed influenced the interviewer's perception within a second of seeing them. They hadn't even said anything yet. That's how fast this information works. And the 7 universal principles of persuasion help you to identify and use all those types of information that can have these effects. Are you starting to see how impactful this can be for you moving through life and business, but also for those who might hire you to work for them? That's exactly why this is such a high-demand soft skill now. Workers who can move the company forward towards its goals more quickly are more valuable and needed in business. So let's get back to the principles. The principle of reciprocity works because we all have been trained to not take or receive something from someone else without giving in return. When someone invites you to their birthday party, then, you feel that you ought to invite them to your birthday party. If someone does you a favor, then when they ask you to help you with something, you find it really difficult to reject that request. So remember this rule. People have a tendency to give back the same type of behavior that was first given to them. And when it comes to agreeing to a request of others, we are more likely to say yes to someone when we feel that we owe that person something. Let me give you a business example. A very large fast food restaurant chain experimented with giving away balloons to kids. They could give the balloon away as a thank you after the family had ordered food, which would be more of a reward. Or they could give the balloon to people as they entered the restaurant before they had ordered anything, which would be a gift. Would the promise of a balloon after ordering or giving them one before they ordered influence how much people would spend on their meal? Giving it afterwards didn't have much of an impact, but the people who received the balloon before ordering spent on average 20% more. And interestingly, while the balloon would bring more joy to kids than it would to the parents, the sale of coffee, which kids don't tend to drink, went up by 25%. Now you understand why in shops they sometimes give things away, including just to kids who might not be in control of the spending in that store. A supermarket near me gives free fruit to kids. Might that affect the spending of the parents, like with the balloons? Yes, it would. Now, a meal or a trolley of groceries might be considered a small expense. But what about a large request? A charity in the UK approached high-income earners and asked them if they would be willing to donate a full day's wages to the charity. When they were just asked that request, 5% of those asked agreed to donate a full day's wages. But to another group of people that they approached and made that request to, they first gave them a small bag of sweets worth about 50 cents. Out of that group, 11% donated a full day's wages. That is more than double the number of people. And a day's wages would, for them, have been more than tens of thousands of dollars, or pounds in this case. There are many strategies on how to use reciprocity, which we teach in more comprehensive courses. But let me give you one way to use it that helps you to build good relationships with people and to be more persuasive with them down the line. You need to adopt a helpful attitude. Ask yourself the question, how can I help this person genuinely without expecting something in return? Think about fellow students. Of course, we don't want to interfere with their need to study or their ability to learn skills by doing their homework. But we can be helpful in many other ways, either related to their education or privately. You could remind your friends of when particular work is due. You could point them to helpful materials. You could take and share some notes if they missed a class. Think about teachers or professors. How could you help them? Of course, you don't want to be difficult in class. That would be the opposite of being helpful. Instead, be helpful in class. Volunteer for projects. And keep an eye out for things that the teacher or the professor might benefit from, professionally or personally. Now, we all know that if others see us be particularly helpful to a superior, that might give rise to some criticism. So you might want to be discreet about how you do this. Genuine from an interest to help, but not too often in front of a group that you're part of. And that could be a group of fellow students, or once you are working, that would be fellow employees, in which case you don't want to do things in front of too often. There's a lot more to reciprocity, and it has many more dynamics, but I trust you found this simple and valuable. Intangible gifts like helping others can be very powerful. If your approach to this comes from a genuine desire to be helpful to the other person, it will help you build strong relationships quickly. And when you need their cooperation or agreement in the future, it will come far more readily. Let's move on to another couple of principles. I can't cover all of them, the episode would get too long. Let me skip the principles of unity, liking, and social proof, which are very powerful principles. But let me jump to one of my favorite principles, the principle of authority. Let me share with you how you can become more trusted in an instant and have people pay more attention to you, even if you're young. And this also explains why some people were hired more easily during job interviews and why they got higher starting wages. Would that be valuable to you? And while we're on value, if you think that what I've covered is valuable to you, then it would be valuable to your friends too, wouldn't it be? Provided that this episode wasn't recommended to you by your school or university, in which case your fellow students will already know about it, you might agree with me that all other students would benefit from hearing this, and you could bring it to their attention. Likewise, mature family members that you have, maybe run their own business, they're working, they also need to know this. You could, because you care about them or because you'd like to help others and would like to see them succeed in life, share this with them and tell them how valuable and entertaining you found this. Tell them that they should not miss out on these insights. You'll be doing them a favor, wouldn't you? And that would also, in your favor, activate the principle of reciprocity that we just talked about. That's not a bad thing either, is it? My favorite principle is the principle of authority. I'm not sure why. Maybe because it helps others to listen to what you say more intently or with greater importance. Maybe because it helps to establish trust. Or maybe because its impact can be nearly undetectable. Authority is powerful, and authority has so many application strategies that we can't all cover here, but I'll share some dynamics with you that you should use the rest of your life. Let's first explain what powers the principle of authority. It's generally a good idea to follow the advice and recommendations of others if there is someone else available who knows more about a particular subject than you do. It is impossible for us to know everything, and so when there is someone who has more knowledge and expertise, we are typically better off, could be safer and more successful if we followed their advice. And that is another shortcut. A shortcut for that system one, the intuitive part of the brain, to make a quick decision. So remember this rule. People tend to follow those with superior knowledge and wisdom. One of the most powerful ways that this has been demonstrated, in my opinion, was with the following study. This happened in a laboratory setting. Couples were asked to come in and they were wired up to brain measuring instrumentation. They were then confronted with a number of questions to consider, and the researchers would be able to see the activity in their brain as this was happening. At some point, the couple who had children were being asked to consider difficult financial situations. For example, how they would prepare themselves so that their children would still be able to have high-quality education if one of the members of the couple was to die. So we're talking about very serious questions about very serious situations. When this question was asked of couples, their brain lit up with activity. We could say that there was high, intense activity going on in the brain. Shortly after that, the researcher would enter the room accompanied by a person dressed in a very professional-looking business suit. The researcher would then tell the couple, "This is one of the best financial planners in the country. He has won multiple awards and has helped thousands of people organize and restructure their financial situation for the best possible outcomes." We can't say that the activity in the brain stopped. I mean, that would have meant that they died on the spot. But their brain activity reduced dramatically when they heard this introduction. They stopped thinking for themselves. In case it wasn't clear to you, this effect in their brain occurred without the person in the business suit ever having opened their mouth. as soon as they heard that there was someone in the room to help with superior knowledge and wisdom on that topic, their brain stopped worrying about it, as there was someone else that they could hand the work to formulate this decision to. The principle of authority helps us with a number of important situations. It allows us to give the proposals that we are making of other people more power if we can include evidence that an expert agrees with what we are proposing. We can also make our proposals or suggestions be paid closer attention to if we make our audience realize that we have knowledge and expertise on that topic. And especially when people are uncertain about how to judge you, we can also help to establish ourselves as trustworthy, knowledgeable, capable, and credible. Does that sound pretty amazing and powerful? Without lying or cheating, if we know what information people should hear or see, we can make them understand that you have skill and wisdom, even if you're young, and help you be seen as more trustworthy, capable, and credible. I'd be happy to do a comprehensive presentation or lesson at your school or university, in person or online. But for today, let me explain the dynamic that saw job applicants get hired more quickly and be awarded higher starting wages. Because, and this is why I'm so passionate about introducing persuasion science to young adults, without you knowing how to be more persuasive in an honest and ethical way, you are unnecessarily letting success that was yours to have slip through your fingers. Meaning that when you're ready to apply for a placement in a college or university, or when you're applying for that dream job that will change the trajectory of the rest of your life, your chances are by definition reduced because you don't know all the ways that are available for you to maximize your chances of success. Of course, some formal training would be needed to teach you all of this. Only about 20 hours all up, but I'll do my best in here to give you some things that you can do to not go in unarmed when hoping to convince in what are, for you, life-changing situations and moments. Let me tell you about this subtle and high-impact way that the principle of authority can help you. And it has to do with how you dress. Let me highlight how automatic people's reactions are to how someone dresses. Researchers in Texas had a man turn up at a crowded street corner where people were waiting for the pedestrian crossing light to turn green. The man would start to cross the street when the light was still red, provided it wasn't life-threatening to do so, but of course it was still against the law. The question was, how many people would follow him when he did that? Half of the time, he would turn up wearing a work shirt and pants. The other half of the time, he was wearing a three-piece suit and a tie. Now, ask yourself, did what he was wearing make any difference to how much of an authority he was on the subject of crossing the street? Would he have known any more about crossing the street than you do? What he was wearing should not have made any difference to the number of people who thought that crossing the street against the light at that moment was a good idea. But yet, 3.5 times as many people followed him when he was wearing the three-piece suit. He just had the look of authority. He had the look of a man who was successful. So how does this work? When people are uncertain about you and need to form an opinion about you, they look for outward clues. Your appearance helps them to make a snap judgment about you. And snap judgment is surprisingly accurate. Research shows that those judgments are made within a second. Your appearance can therefore have a negative, neutral, or positive impact on how people perceive you. Meaning that if you don't pay attention to this, the chances of success, the chances that someone will see you in a more positive light, the chances that people will want to cooperate with your request are slipping through your fingers unnecessarily. This explains what one study found regarding candidates who were attending job interviews. Those candidates who wore designer label clothing were hired more quickly and were, on average, offered 10% higher starting wages by the candidate evaluators. Unfortunately, we haven't got enough time to dive into the many aspects of the principle of authority here, but you can scoop up a few more from listening to other episodes in this podcast. For today, let's re-emphasize that you can use the way you look to your ethical advantage in persuading others to do as you ask. You've heard the expression, dress to impress. There is an enormous amount of truth in that, but there are a few rules that you should not fail to keep in mind. You want to present yourself in the best possible version of you. Your clothes, your shoes, your hair, and potentially some jewelry. You should even consider items that you might be using as you spend time with your audience. And with audience, I mean, for example, the person interviewing you. If you have to take notes, and then you're going to use a pen and paper, bring a nice compendium to store your notebook in. When you grab a pen, it's not going to give this feeling of authority if you pull out a cheap plastic pen that came out of a box of 24. I'm not saying you should turn up with a crazy expensive fountain pen. Use something that looks nice, that you are comfortable using, and that doesn't fail you when you're actually writing. If you're bringing your tablet, then consider how it looks. Consider the cover that you have around it, and ask yourself, is it such a professional look to use the keyboard feature to take your notes? If you're bringing a bag, what does it look like? What does it say about you? A linen bag that was a souvenir from the last music concert you went to may not improve your chances. And then, and this is harder to change last minute, how do you speak? How do you walk? Do you have a habit of focusing on the person who's talking to you, or are you easily distracted? You can practice these things to make better impressions the rest of your life. Perhaps part of the process of being considered for a position might involve going to dinner with some of the parties involved. Your table manners, the way you sit, the way you use your cutlery, can quickly signal to people from more affluent or traditional backgrounds that you are not part of their social circle, and negatively impact or obliterate your chances to getting the job before the interview even begins. If I'm reaching you early on in those moments when your interactions with other people that will shape the trajectory of your life are still further in your future, then you could consider taking classes in language and etiquette and table manners. Perhaps a parent, a family member or carer might actually be really good at these things. Perhaps you've been rebelling against that. I know I have when I was a teenager. But now that you know that these things could hold an incredible influence over your future, you might seek these people out. Pay them a compliment. Apologize for having rebelled against it and tell them that you now understand its importance and would appreciate it if they could teach you. It is relatively safe to say that at some point these skills and habits will impact how your life will go one way or another. When it comes to your education in general, knowing your stuff or mastering the skills of your trade may not have the impact that you're hoping for, and it won't be the only thing that influences whether you are the best applicant for the job. If you can't persuade others that you are the best choice, or if they've already judged you to be unsuitable or inferior before you even opened your mouth, it's game over, and your future will unfold less favorably than you could have achieved. Life may very well be harder than it needs to be. The total earnings of your career may be significantly less as a result. And perhaps the opportunities your children will have will be less because you didn't end up where you could have ended up. Please do remember that we need to use persuasion science ethically. Unethical use can have disastrous consequences. So don't go out and rent a designer suit for a job application if you don't usually own one. It may help you in the moment, but when you turn up at work to never ever turn up the way you look during the job interview, this may start to raise some eyebrows and could seriously backfire on you. So, what do you wear? Here are 2 rules you should remember. Dress well, but wear what you are comfortable wearing, using things you have in your own wardrobe. But at the same time, you need to be conscious of how your audience is dressing. Your aim is to dress just one level better than they are. When it comes to job interviews, if they are conducted in an office setting, in a typical business environment, then dressing formally is likely the best choice. But if you know that you're applying for a job in a company that prides itself on being less formal, then wearing less formal clothing would likely be the best choice. You would stick out like a sore thumb if you turned up in a 3-piece suit. Try to find out what the other people might be wearing. And if you're not sure, then make sure that you dress very well. But think ahead of what item of clothing you could remove to dress down in an instant when you realize that you are overdressed compared to the other people in the meeting. If you're wearing a suit jacket, you could quickly remove that. If you're wearing a tie and you notice that nobody else in that office is wearing one, you could quickly remove it. Good luck. Authority can, in seconds, through what we say, also establish us as a trustworthy source of information. It can raise our credibility as high as it can go, but too many people intuitively say and write things that actively reduce their credibility. I can't cover all these dynamics here, but I would be delighted to present them at your school or university. As we've covered a lot already, I thought I'd leave it at these 2 principles. But let me give you one more principle of persuasion and one of its strategies for you to use. But do remember that Each principle has likely a dozen different application strategies and dynamics that you won't be able to use and profit from without some formal training in this subject. The principle of scarcity teaches us that we value things more that are rare, scarce, and whose availability is limited. This goes back far in our evolution and is a basic survival skill. I mentioned this before. Think about the time of primitive man and primitive woman. If you have a certain amount of resources, be it safety, security, be it things to trade with, then it's nice for you to get more of that, but it could be detrimental or fatal to you and your family if you lose some of those resources. In episode 16, I dive deeper into scarcity, and in there I highlight some research showing that when college students consider the potential decay or improvement in their romantic relationships, they experience much stronger emotions when they considered equal-sized decays in their relationships rather than improvements. People are more likely to cheat when they need to avert a potential loss than they are to achieve a gain. And we all know the pressure we feel when we're in a good, potentially important conversation and the phone rings. Let me teach you one subtle dynamic that most professionals get wrong and is costing them every single day. When we ask something of someone, we seem to have a natural tendency to explain what the other person will get if they decide to follow our recommendation, proposal, or request. You might hear someone say in a brochure or in a website or in a job application, if you do this, you will save money. If you agree to this, you'll be safer. If you go along with our request, it'll be better for the environment. If you purchase our product, you'll be able to work more efficiently and save valuable time. All this is language that tells people what they will gain, what they will get more of if they go along with the request. But we know that people pay more attention to news that highlights that something is scarce, that something is running out, or that they will lose something. So we should, and we can, use a different way of explaining the impact of what we are proposing. Instead of explaining what they will get if they go along with our request, we can point out what they will lose if they don't go along with it. If I will save money if I go along with your request, what would happen to my finances if I didn't go along with your request? I would lose money, right? If I would be safer if I went along with your request, what would happen to my level of safety if I didn't go along with your request? I'd be more unsafe than I can be. What if I would save time? Right, I would lose time if I didn't go ahead. Now, how big an impact can all this have? Well, that depends on the situation and how suitable what it is you're offering is for the person that you're offering it to, as it does with all the strategies and all the principles. But let me share one study that I love. A company was conducting home assessments, taking measurements to investigate the benefit of fully insulating the home. At the end of the assessment, homeowners were told the outcome of the assessment and what that would mean for them. If they did or didn't insulate their home fully, would have an effect on their finances in terms of being better insulated or not. This would be different for each home, of course, because every home is different. But let's use $1 a day as an example. Half of the homeowners were told that if they insulated their home fully, they would be able to save $1 a day. Is that gain language? Yes, it is. If they save $1 a day, that means they have an extra $1 a day. The other half of the homeowners were told that if they didn't fully insulate their homes, they would be losing $1 a day. That is clearly loss language, right? In the end, it was the same $1 in our example, but truthfully highlighting the fact that they would be losing $1 every day allowed system 1 of the intuitive part of the brain to pay attention and make a yes decision more easily. In this case, homeowners who were given the loss instruction decided to go ahead a lot more than the homeowners who were told how much they would save. 150% more people decided to fully insulate their houses. Will the application of persuasion science always produce percentages like this? No, it varies. It might be less, and it can also be a lot more. In the first episode of my podcast, I explained how, through a different principle of persuasion, which I've not covered in this episode with you, students who were desperate to improve their grades because they would be expelled from school were a lot more successful depending on which instructions they received at the beginning of their efforts to raise their grades. Because this third group had, within their instructions, a dynamic that activated one of the principles of persuasion, they were 514% more successful in raising their grades enough to avoid being expelled. So yes, the impact of using persuasion science and in an ethical way can have a big impact, even much bigger than 514%. In case there's any teachers, trainers, or professors listening to this, which I hope they are, to investigate me and this subject, to possibly include a reference to it, or perhaps to invite me to do 1 or 2 sessions on it at your school or university, then I hope they are listening to what I just said. Students were 514% more successful in achieving the grades that they needed by how they were instructed or asked to do something at the start. Persuasion science is valuable for any person, professionally and privately, and that includes teaching staff and educational facilities. If they want to lose less students who could have enrolled to begin with, if they would like to avoid more students achieving more poorly than they can, which of course affects the school performance figures, if they would like less parents to withdraw their kids from school unnecessarily, and cultivate a loyalty with parents and students that was really theirs to have, then the school staff, whether they are teaching staff or sales staff, need to get trained properly in the science of persuasion too. But the punchline for you as students is that using persuasion science ethically can have a big impact on your efforts to achieve your goals by shaping how you do or don't communicate with others and even with yourself. It's hard or impossible to measure how this impacts the results of a single individual on only a few interactions, like job applications, applications for grants or university placements. But just like building a skyscraper, it is generally to your advantage, and you'll get better results by using the available science. At least when we understand the science and use it, we know we have ethically done what we could to not reduce our chances of getting the results that we wanted. So here is my request of you, and then I'll give you one more lesson and teach you what could be called a magic word, whose power you don't want to miss out on. Here is my request. You made it to nearly the end of this episode, so it's safe to assume that you found this interesting, valuable, and worth your time. If you are in a school still, if you are in university or business school, I'm seriously excited to share more with you, your fellow students and teaching staff. I allocate a certain amount of time each year to make myself available to do so, either in person, which is a lot more fun, or even via video call. If you'd like to not miss out on other powerful insights that I could share about persuasion science that I don't share anywhere else in this podcast show, and you would like to avoid your fellow students from wasting some of their success in life that they could have, then you should bring this episode to the attention of the following people. The parents' committee of your school or university. As social influence or ethical persuasion is the third most urgent soft skill to be developed, and businesses are asking for it, no one will be as motivated as parents and guardians to ask your school to make time for this topic to benefit all the students. Secondly, of course, anyone at the school or university who has influence over guest speakers or events. You could approach the dean, the career advisor, the head of department for business, the principal of the school, and of course your professors or teachers in English, marketing, or business. Of course, we want you to be as persuasive as possible when you make that request, right? So I've written a text that you could use if you like, which you can download via the link in the show notes. There's one for schools and universities and one for a parent committee. Have a read and see if you can identify some of the types of information I covered in this episode. But let me give you one more little piece of secret sauce. Before you hand or send your letter, regardless if you're using the one that I wrote, first ask those people if they think it's important to get you ready and prepared for what is to come in real life. When they say yes, you can then tell them that you'll give or send them something that you'd like them to pay attention to and consider. Just by asking that one question first, you will be a lot more persuasive in getting them to read or listen to you and act on it. If you can't encourage others to investigate this topic, then please do the following for me instead, or do both, because it helps me understand that you've enjoyed what you've heard, and it allows others to find this information more quickly. Please leave a nice comment or review on this podcast for me and others to read, and mention in it what you liked about it. I'd appreciate it. The special word I have for you that you can use to be more persuasive immediately is easy to remember. You're already using it, but not in situations where you could, and so you'll be losing success without it. Let me tell you about another piece of research. In an office building, people were waiting in line to use the photocopier. One of the people, who was part of the experiment, lined up as well and asked the person in front of them if they would let them go in front of them. When they said, "Can I go in front of you?" which doesn't use a reason, 60% of people agreed with that. When they said, "Can I go in front of you because I'm in a hurry?" which does include a reason, 94% agreed. So it's definitely a good idea to give people a reason when you're asking for something. The third group was very interesting though. They left the word because, but removed the reason. They said, "Can I go in front of you? Because I need to make some copies." It sounds a little bit like a reason, but it wasn't really. Everyone in the line was there to make copies, and so was the person being asked. Even with the reason removed, but the word because left in, 93% of people agreed to the request. We could therefore say that the word because has special power. Just by using it, more people will agree with you, as the study shows. So when you ask something of another person, you would be more of a detective of influence if you made sure that the word because is in your request. And your chances of getting a yes are, of course, bigger still if you provide a genuine reason for your request. Thank you for your interest. I've got a few complimentary gifts for you in case you're interested. On my website, ethicalpersuasion.com.au, the link is in the show notes. In the menu, there is an option where you find our complimentary gifts. This includes an ebook that you can download just by right-clicking, so no email required. There is a 7-day email challenge, for which, of course, we do need your email address, and, of course, a newsletter to share regular insights with you. We're also working on giving you complimentary access to one of my teaching programs for about 5 weeks, which will be an exceptional value. And of course, I can encourage you to listen to other episodes in this podcast, starting with episode 1. Your ability to be ethically persuasive and influence others that what you are suggesting is a good option for you both will impact the rest of your life. I'm delighted to have had the opportunity to introduce this simple and exciting science to you, which is ethical, research-based, costless to use, and very effective. I encourage you to use what you've learned today and always make sure to use it in an ethical way. So don't make anything up, don't exaggerate, and don't create situations that didn't really exist. Always aim to build strong, loyal relationships with the people that you hope to be more persuasive with in the future. If I can play a greater role in the mastery of this skill and its subtle nuances, then I would be delighted. I'd like to dedicate this episode to my wonderful daughter, who's nearly turning 18, and I wish her and you an influential future, one in which you'll hear no less often.